I stared at my phone screen, watching the timestamp change from 2:47 a.m. to 2:48 a.m. The text message from my mother glowed in the darkness of my Denver apartment. We're out of money. The mortgage is due tomorrow. Your father is having chest pains. 2 weeks earlier, my parents had chosen my younger brother Derek to inherit our family construction company worth $2.3 million and the family estate in suburban Colorado Springs. I had been completely cut out, told I wasn't leadership material like Derek. Now my phone buzzed again. Dad's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it, remembering the humiliation, the betrayal, the way they dismissed 5 years of my dedication. My finger hovered over the decline button. The ringtone pierced the silence of my studio apartment, and against every instinct screaming at me to ignore it, I answered. My father's voice cracked through the speaker, barely recognizable from the confident businessman who'd dismissed me 14 days ago. Hoban, please, I know you have every right to hang up on me, but your mother and I need you. Derek has made some terrible mistakes and we're in serious trouble. I sat up in bed, my mind immediately flashing back to that devastating family meeting 2 weeks prior. My parents Robert and Linda Thornfield had summoned both Derek and me to the mahogany-paneled study of their 4,200 square foot mansion overlooking the foothills. The room smelled of leather and old money, with built-in bookshelves filled with construction manuals and family photos showcasing 3 generations of Thornfield builders. Derek had strutted in wearing his new suit from Denver's Cherry Creek Mall, fresh from completing his MBA at the University of Colorado Boulder. His sandy brown hair was perfectly styled, his confident smile radiating the kind of charm that had always made our parents beam with pride. Meanwhile, I'd arrived straight from the job site in my work boots and dust-covered jeans, my hands still bearing the calluses from 5 years of running Thornfield Construction's day-to-day operations. Our father had positioned himself behind his massive oak desk like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. Robert Thornfield, at 56, still carried the broad shoulders of a man who'd built his fortune with his own hands, though recent stress had carved deeper lines around his steel-gray eyes. Our mother sat in her favorite burgundy wingback chair, her auburn hair swept into an elegant bun, nervously adjusting her pearl necklace. Boys, your mother and I have made an important decision about the future of our family business. Robert had announced, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect on construction sites for 30 years. Derek, you'll be taking over as chief executive officer immediately, and you'll inherit both the company and this house. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I'd been the one transforming Thornfield Construction from a small operation into a powerhouse, growing annual revenue from $800,000 to $2.1 million. I'd secured contracts with major developers. Across the Front Range, implemented new safety protocols that reduced workplace injuries by 60%, and built relationships with suppliers that saved the company hundreds of thousands in materials costs. Your brother has the education and natural leadership qualities we need for modern business challenges. Robert had continued, finally meeting my shocked gaze. Derek's MBA gives him the financial expertise and strategic thinking necessary to take Thornfield Construction to the next level. Linda had nodded enthusiastically, her voice warm with maternal pride. Derek has always shown such wonderful people skills, and his business degree means he understands corporate management in ways that practical experience alone can't provide. We believe he's better positioned to navigate the complexities of today's construction industry. Derek had accepted the news with characteristic confidence, already discussing plans to modernize the company's marketing approach and expand into commercial real estate development. He'd mentioned bringing in consultants from his business school network and implementing management theories he'd learned in his organizational leadership courses. I'd sat there in stunned silence, watching my life's work handed to someone who'd never swung a hammer professionally or negotiated with a subcontractor. Derek had crashed 3 cars during college, including a BMW convertible He'd totaled while texting and driving. He dropped out of Colorado State University after 2 semesters of partying, then lasted only 1 year at Front Range Community College before finally completing his degree at UC Boulder on his 3rd attempt. My girlfriend Sarah had warned me this might happen. She'd observed our family dynamics during Sunday dinners, noting how Derek could charm our parents with stories about business theories, while I struggled to articulate the practical knowledge I'd gained from years of hands-on experience. Sarah worked as a project manager for a competing construction firm and understood the industry's demands better than anyone in my family. Derek's never worked a day in construction. I'd finally managed to say, my voice sounding hollow in the ornate study. He doesn't know the difference between load-bearing walls and partition walls. How can he run a construction company? Robert's expression had hardened. Leadership isn't about technical knowledge, Hoban. It's about vision, education, and the ability to inspire others. Derek has those qualities in abundance. Now, 2 weeks later, my father's desperate voice on the phone told a very different story. Derek made some investments with company funds. Robert explained, his words tumbling out in a panicked rush. He believed he could triple the money quickly in cryptocurrency before anyone noticed the missing funds. When that failed, he took out a second mortgage on our house to cover his gambling losses at underground poker games in downtown Denver. My stomach dropped as the full scope of Derek's destruction became clear. The golden child who was supposed to lead our family business had gambled away everything in a matter of days. How much, I asked, though I dreaded the answer. We owe Vincent Carrera $1.8 million, and he wants payment within 72 hours. Derek has disappeared, Hoban. He left a note saying he's going to Las Vegas to find a solution, but we haven't heard from him since yesterday morning. Vincent Carrera. Even I knew that name from whispered conversations among construction workers. He operated in the shadowy world between legitimate business loans and criminal extortion funding desperate contractors who couldn't get traditional bank financing. His interest rates were astronomical, and his collection methods were rumored to be brutal. The company bank accounts are empty. Robert continued, his voice breaking. Derek sold our equipment to pawn shops across the metro area. The house title has been transferred as collateral, and we have 48 hours before foreclosure proceedings begin. I closed my eyes, processing the magnitude of the disaster. Everything my family had built over 3 generations was gone, destroyed by Derek's arrogance and my parents' blind favoritism. The irony burned like acid in my throat. The son they deemed unworthy of leadership was now their only hope for survival. 20 minutes later, I was driving through the pre-dawn darkness toward Colorado Springs, my hands gripping the steering wheel as my father's desperate words echoed in my mind. The familiar route along Highway 25 had never felt longer, each mile marker a reminder of the countless times I'd made this journey to work on family projects or attend Sunday dinners that now seemed like elaborate performances designed to showcase Derek's superiority. I arrived at the family home to find it transformed into a scene of chaos that bore no resemblance to the pristine showcase I'd always known. Legal documents were scattered across the marble-topped dining room table like the aftermath of a tornado, mixing with unpaid bills and bank statements marked with red ink. My mother paced frantically through the great room, her usually perfect hair disheveled, and her silk pajamas wrinkled from a sleepless night. Robert sat hunched in his leather recliner, clutching his chest and breathing heavily. The man who'd always projected unwavering strength now looked every one of his 56 years, his face pale and drawn with exhaustion. When he saw me enter through the front door, relief flooded his features. "Thank God you came," Linda whispered, rushing to embrace me with shaking hands. "I was so afraid you'd refuse to help us after what we did to you." I gently extracted myself from her desperate hug, surveying the financial devastation spread across every surface. Bank statements showed account balances of $0 and 0 cents. Equipment sale receipts indicated Derek had liquidated everything from our commercial-grade power tools to the company's fleet of pickup trucks selling items worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to various pawn shops for a fraction of their value. "Show me everything," I said, settling onto the leather couch, where I'd spent countless childhood hours reading construction magazines and dreaming of joining the family business. Robert produced a manila folder thick with documents that painted a comprehensive picture of Derek's spectacular self-destruction. The cryptocurrency investments had been made through an online platform called Crypto Moon Exchange, which promised unrealistic returns of 300% within 30 days. Derek had transferred $870,000 from the company's operating account, apparently convinced he could multiply the money before anyone discovered the unauthorized transactions. When the cryptocurrency values plummeted instead of soaring, Derek had panicked and sought faster solutions. The underground poker games operated out of a warehouse complex near downtown Denver's South Platte River, where amateur players with more money than sense regularly lost fortunes to experienced hustlers. Derek had believed his business school education would give him an advantage in reading opponents and calculating odds. He kept saying he had a system. Linda explained, her voice thick with regret. Derek was so confident that his analytical skills would help him win back the company money and more. He assured us he'd studied game theory and probability in his MBA program. The poker losses had been even more catastrophic than the cryptocurrency disaster. Derek had lost an additional $460,000 over the course of 3 nights borrowing against the house title when his remaining company funds ran out. The debt to Vincent Carrera had accumulated rapidly, with interest rates of 20% per week compounding the original loan amount. But the most shocking revelation came when I examined the loan documents more carefully. There, on several crucial pages, was my signature guaranteeing $600,000 in personal liability. The handwriting looked remarkably similar to my own careful script, but I'd never seen these documents before. Derek practiced copying your signature for weeks. Robert admitted, unable to meet my eyes. He used old contracts from the company files to perfect the forgery. He said it was just temporary, that he'd fix everything before you ever found out. My hands trembled as I studied the forged signatures, realizing how thoroughly my own family had violated my trust. Derek hadn't just gambled away the business. He'd deliberately implicated me in his crimes, ensuring that his failures would destroy my life as well. Linda produced another stack of letters that made my blood run cold. Derek had been intercepting my mail for months, including several job offers from competing construction firms across Colorado and neighboring states. One letter from Premier Building Solutions in Phoenix offered an annual salary of $180,000 plus equity participation, nearly double what I'd been earning at Thornfield Construction. Derek wrote rejection letters and sent them back. Robert explained, his shame palpable. He wanted to make sure you remained committed to our family business, never knowing about better opportunities elsewhere. The scope of Derek's manipulation was breathtaking. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to grow the company and prove my worth, he'd been systematically sabotaging my career prospects to ensure I'd remain available as a backup plan if his inheritance didn't work out as expected. My phone buzzed with an unknown local number, and I answered without thinking. Hobon Thornfield. The voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of menace that made my skin crawl. "This is Marcus, calling on behalf of Vincent Carrera. We understand you've become legally responsible for your brother's gambling debts. Mr. Carrera would like to meet with you tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock to discuss payment arrangements." I never signed anything. I protested, though my eyes were fixed on the forged documents spread across the table. Marcus chuckled softly. "The state of Colorado recognizes those signatures as legally binding, Mr. Thornfield. We'll text you the address. Please don't disappoint Mr. Carrera by failing to appear. He doesn't appreciate unreliability in his business relationships." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my parents' terrified faces. Derek hadn't just destroyed our family business and stolen our home. He'd made me a target for criminals who had no interest in distinguishing between voluntary and involuntary debt. "What are we going to do?" Linda whispered, sinking into her favorite armchair, as if the weight of our circumstances was too much to bear. I looked around the home where I'd grown up, remembering birthday parties in the backyard and Christmas mornings by the stone fireplace. These rooms held 30 years of memories, but they also represented everything I'd lost when my parents chose Derek over me. Now they expected me to risk my life to save theirs, despite having thrown away my loyalty and dedication like worthless garbage. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. The son they deemed unworthy of leadership was now the only person who might possess the skills and determination necessary to navigate this crisis. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with, and whether there was any legal way to escape Derek's trap. I spent the remainder of the morning documenting every piece of evidence related to Derek's financial crimes, photographing bank statements and loan documents with my phone, while my parents watched anxiously from the kitchen. By noon, I had assembled a comprehensive file that painted a clear picture of systematic fraud and forgery, but I needed professional legal advice to understand my options. Jake Martinez had been my closest friend since elementary school, and his job as a paralegal at Morrison & Associates downtown gave him access to legal resources I desperately needed. I called him from my truck outside the family home, explaining the situation in broad terms while avoiding specific details about Vincent Carrera's threats. "Bring everything to my office," Jake said immediately. "This sounds like a complex fraud case, and you need to understand your legal position before making any decisions about how to respond." Morrison & Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass office building in Denver's central business district, and Jake met me in the lobby wearing his characteristic, serious expression. His black hair was neatly trimmed, and his dark suit projected the kind of professional competence I'd always respected. We'd grown up in the same working-class neighborhood, but Jake had chosen education over manual labor, earning his paralegal certification, while I'd been learning construction trades. In a conference room overlooking the South Platte River, Jake spread my documents across a polished mahogany table and began analyzing them with methodical precision. His legal training had taught him to examine contracts and financial records for subtle details that most people would miss. These forged signatures are actually quite sophisticated. Jake observed, comparing Derek's work to legitimate samples of my handwriting. But there's a crucial legal flaw that your brother didn't anticipate. Colorado state law requires notarization for personal guarantees exceeding $500,000, and none of these documents bear a notary's seal. Relief flooded through me as Jake explained that Derek's forgeries might not be legally enforceable without proper notarization. The criminals threatening my family might believe they had legitimate claims against me, but a court would likely reject their demands based on procedural violations. However, Jake's next discovery was even more significant. While researching the legal history of Thornfield Construction and the family property, he'd uncovered irregularities in the original ownership transfer that had occurred when my grandfather died 16 years ago. "Your grandfather's will is on file at the county courthouse," Jake explained, pulling up digital records on his laptop computer. "Eugene Thornfield was very specific about how the business and property should be inherited, and it's nothing like what actually happened. According to the official court documents, my grandfather had stipulated that his construction company and real estate holdings should pass to the grandson who demonstrates the greatest dedication to the family trade and values of honest work." The will mentioned both Derek and me by name, acknowledging that we were too young at the time of his death to make immediate determinations about our commitment levels. Eugene had appointed my father as temporary executor, with instructions to observe both grandsons for a reasonable period before making the final inheritance decision. The will required this evaluation to be based on observed merit, not favoritism, and specifically warned against allowing personal preferences to override objective assessments of work ethic and character. Most shocking of all, the final transfer had never been legally completed. Robert had been managing the business and property as temporary executor for 16 years, but the formal inheritance review and transfer process had never occurred. Under Colorado probate law, both Derek and I retained equal claims to challenge the inheritance based on our grandfather's original intent. Your father has essentially been squatting on property that should have been properly evaluated years ago, Jake explained. You have legitimate grounds to petition the probate court for the review your grandfather's will required. The implications were staggering. Everything Derek had gambled away might not have been his to lose in the first place. If I could prove that my years of dedication to the family business demonstrated superior merit compared to Derek's absence and recent failures, I might be able to claim the inheritance that should have been mine all along. But legal proceedings would take months, and Vincent Carrera's deadline was measured in hours. I needed to find Derek and confront him directly about the extent of his crimes, while simultaneously building a legal case to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Jake helped me access social media accounts that might reveal Derek's current location. His girlfriend Amanda frequently posted photos and status updates documenting their relationship, and her recent activity suggested they weren't in Las Vegas as my parents believed. Amanda's sister Crystal lived in Aurora, just 20 minutes from downtown Denver, and her Instagram account showed recent photos of Derek and Amanda in what appeared to be a small apartment complex. The location tags and background details were enough to narrow down the address, giving me a chance to track down my brother before his criminal associates found him first. Be careful, Jake warned as I gathered the evidence files. Even if those signatures aren't legally valid, the people threatening your family might not care about technicalities. They've invested time and effort in collecting this debt, and they won't give up easily. I drove toward Aurora with my mind racing through potential scenarios and strategies. Derek had created this disaster through a combination of arrogance and stupidity, but he was still my brother. Despite everything he'd done to me and our family, I couldn't abandon him to face Vincent Carrera's violence alone. The apartment complex on Havana Street was a modest 2-story building with faded brick exterior and a small parking lot filled with older vehicles. I parked across the street and waited, hoping to catch Derek when he emerged, rather than confronting him inside where Amanda and her sister might complicate the situation. As the sun began to set behind the Rocky Mountains, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed in just 14 days. 2 weeks ago, I'd been the overlooked son struggling to prove myself worthy of my family's respect. Now, I was potentially the rightful heir to a business empire if I could survive long enough to claim it. Dawn was breaking over Aurora when Derek finally emerged from Crystal's apartment building, wearing a rumpled University of Colorado sweatshirt and baseball cap, pulled low over his face. He moved nervously toward a red Honda Civic parked near the building's entrance, constantly checking over his shoulder like a man expecting pursuit. I intercepted him in the 7-Eleven parking lot 3 blocks away, where he'd stopped to buy coffee and energy drinks. Derek's reaction when he saw me was a mixture of relief and terror, his face cycling through emotions as he realized his hiding place had been discovered. "Hoban, thank God," he breathed, setting down his purchases and running his hands through his disheveled hair. "I've been going crazy trying to figure out how to fix this mess." "Start by telling me the truth," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the anger burning in my chest. "Dad told me about the cryptocurrency and poker games, but I want to hear it directly from you." Derek glanced around the empty parking lot, then motioned for me to follow him to a picnic table outside the convenience store. His hands shook as he opened one of the energy drinks, and I noticed he'd lost weight since our last encounter. His cheeks hollow and his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "The cryptocurrency story isn't completely accurate." Derek began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I did lose money in crypto, but that was just me trying to cover up something much worse. Dad's been stealing from client accounts for over 3 years, using the money to feed his gambling addiction at the casinos in Blackhawk. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Our father, the man who'd preached integrity and honest work throughout my childhood, had been systematically defrauding the customers who trusted Thornfield Construction with their life savings. Derek produced a smartphone and showed me bank statements and email records that painted a devastating picture of Robert's crimes. Client escrow accounts that should have contained hundreds of thousands of dollars showed balances near zero. Payments for materials and subcontractor work had been diverted to Robert's personal accounts, then withdrawn as cash for gambling expeditions to the mountain casinos. Mrs. Patricia Huang called last month asking why her kitchen renovation payment had bounced. Derek explained scrolling through saved voicemails. That's when I started investigating and discovered Dad had stolen $1.4 million from client accounts over the past 3 years. I stared at the evidence on Derek's phone, my mind struggling to reconcile this information with the father I thought I knew. Robert had always been demanding and critical, but I'd never suspected him of criminal behavior. The stress lines around his eyes and his recent health problems suddenly took on new significance. "Why didn't you report this to the police?" I asked, though part of me already understood the answer. Derek's face crumpled with shame and exhaustion. "He's still our dad, Hoban. I kept thinking I could fix everything without destroying him. I figured if I could multiply the stolen money through smart investments, I could pay back the clients and get Dad into treatment for his gambling addiction without anyone ever knowing what happened." The crypto investments had been Derek's first attempt to solve the problem quietly. When those failed catastrophically, he'd turned to underground poker games, convinced that his business school education in game theory and probability would give him an advantage over street-level gamblers. "I studied decision trees and risk assessment in my MBA program," Derek said bitterly. "I thought I understood calculated risks better than the criminals running those games. I was an idiot." But Derek's revelations about our father's crimes went even deeper. The loan sharks threatening our family weren't just responding to Derek's gambling debts. They were part of Robert's existing network for money laundering and illegal betting. Vincent Carrera had been facilitating Robert's gambling for months, providing loans secured against business assets and helping him place bets through offshore websites. "Dad owes them separately from what I lost," Derek explained, showing me additional documents on his phone. "The house isn't just collateral for my poker debts, it's also security for Dad's obligations to Carrera's organization." Derek pulled up email exchanges between Robert and various associates in Carrera's network, detailing a complex relationship that had evolved over months of escalating criminal activity. Robert had been using company equipment as collateral for loans, then gambling the borrowed money in hopes of winning enough to cover both his theft from clients and his mounting obligations to the criminal organization. Carrera told me that if we don't pay everything we owe, he'll expose Dad's theft to the district attorney's office. Derek continued, his voice breaking with emotion. Dad would face federal embezzlement charges and probably 20 years in prison. The family would lose everything anyway, but Dad would spend the rest of his life behind bars. I watched my younger brother struggle with the weight of secrets that had been consuming him for weeks. Despite his arrogance and the terrible decisions that had worsened our family's situation, Derek had been motivated by love and loyalty. He destroyed himself trying to protect our father from the consequences of his own criminal behavior. "I know you hate me for what I did to you," Derek said, tears streaming down his face. "I know I don't deserve your help after forging your signature and intercepting your job offers. But I'm begging you to help me find a solution that doesn't put Dad in prison." The irony of the situation was overwhelming. Derek, who'd been chosen as the family's golden child and future leader, was pleading with me to save the father who'd rejected my worth and dedication. The brother who'd inherited everything was now powerless to protect the man who'd favored him over me. But despite everything Derek had done, despite the forged signatures and intercepted opportunities, I couldn't abandon my family to face destruction alone. Whatever crimes Robert had committed, whatever mistakes Derek had made, they were still my father and brother. The values my grandfather had instilled in me demanded that I fight for family even when family had failed to fight for me. We need professional help, I said, finally making a decision that would change all our lives. This is beyond what either of us can handle alone, and we need people who understand both the legal system and how to deal with criminals like Carrera. Derek looked up with desperate hope. Do you have someone in mind? I thought about Elena Rodriguez, the criminal defense attorney Sarah had mentioned months earlier. Elena specialized in financial crimes and organized crime cases, exactly the expertise our family needed to navigate this complex crisis. Maybe, I said, pulling out my phone. But first, you need to understand that if we're going to fix this, everything has to come out. No more secrets, no more lies, no more trying to handle things alone. We tell the truth. We face the consequences, and we find a legal way to protect Dad while making things right for the people he stole from. Derek nodded eagerly, relief flooding his features as he realized he was no longer carrying this burden alone. For the first time since inheriting the family business, he was ready to follow someone else's leadership. Elena Rodriguez's law office occupied a corner suite in a converted warehouse building in Denver's RiNo district, and her reputation for handling complex financial crime cases had made her one of the most respected criminal defense attorneys in Colorado. Sarah had recommended Elena after working with her on a construction fraud case involving a competing firm, praising both her legal expertise and her ability to navigate dangerous situations involving organized crime. Elena was a woman in her early 40s with silver-streaked black hair and intense brown eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the evidence Derek and I presented. Her office walls were lined with diplomas from the University of Denver Law School and photographs showing her with various judges and law enforcement officials, suggesting connections that might prove valuable in our desperate situation. Your family is in serious legal jeopardy, Elena said, after reviewing our documentation for 2 hours. Your father's embezzlement of client funds constitutes federal fraud, while your brother's forgery and gambling activities add additional criminal charges. But the most immediate danger comes from your involvement with Vincent Carrera's organization. Elena leaned back in her leather chair, studying our faces with the calculating expression of someone accustomed to high-stakes criminal cases. However, you may have more options than you realize. I recognize Vincent Carrera's name, but not from criminal defense work. She opened a locked filing cabinet and retrieved a folder marked with federal court seals and confidentiality warnings. I've been working with federal law enforcement on a related case involving money laundering and racketeering in Denver's construction industry. Vincent Carrera isn't just a loan shark. He's FBI Special Agent Vincent Carrera, working deep undercover to investigate organized crime infiltration of legitimate businesses. The revelation stunned both Derek and me into silence. The man we'd feared as a violent criminal was actually a federal agent building cases against real criminals in the construction industry. Our family's crisis had inadvertently connected us to a major federal investigation. Agent Carrera has been developing this cover identity for 18 months. Elena continued, documenting how organized crime groups exploit desperate business owners through predatory lending and money laundering schemes. Your father became a subject of interest 8 months ago when his unusual betting patterns at Black Hawk casinos triggered federal monitoring systems. Elena explained that the FBI had been tracking Robert's financial crimes since discovering irregularities in client escrow accounts during a routine audit of construction industry practices. They knew about the stolen client funds, the underground gambling network, and Derek's recent attempts to cover up the theft through cryptocurrency investments and poker games. But they don't yet have the evidence needed for solid prosecutions, Elena said. Federal prosecutors require recorded confessions or documented admissions of guilt to build cases that will hold up in court. They need someone inside your family to wear recording equipment and gather statements of Robert admitting to his crimes. In exchange for cooperation, the FBI was prepared to offer Robert a plea agreement that would minimize his prison exposure. Instead of facing 20 years in federal prison for embezzlement and money laundering, he could receive 3 years of supervised probation community service and mandatory restitution to affected clients. Derek asked the question I was afraid to voice. What guarantees do we have that the FBI will honor their promises? Elena produced official Department of Justice documents outlining the cooperation agreement terms. Agent Carrera has been authorized to offer your family immunity from prosecution in exchange for recorded evidence of Robert's crimes and information about other contractors involved in similar schemes. Your brother would receive complete immunity for his forgery and gambling activities, while you would be cleared of any liability related to the forged loan documents. The FBI's investigation extended far beyond our family's situation. They'd identified 12 other construction companies whose owners had been victimized by similar criminal networks, creating a pattern of exploitation that targeted desperate business owners struggling with cash flow problems or personal addictions. Your father isn't the only contractor who's been manipulated by this organization, Elena explained. They systematically identify vulnerable business owners, provide them with gambling opportunities and easy credit, then use their mounting debts to force participation in money laundering schemes. Elena arranged a meeting with Agent Carrera at a coffee shop in downtown Denver's Union Station, a public location where we could discuss cooperation terms without arousing suspicion. The irony of meeting our supposed criminal nemesis in the bustling transit hub wasn't lost on me. The man we'd feared was actually trying to protect families like ours from real predators. Agent Carrera looked nothing like the menacing figure I'd imagined. He appeared to be in his late 30s with the lean build and alert eyes of someone accustomed to dangerous undercover work. His casual clothing and relaxed demeanor suggested a federal agent comfortable operating in criminal environments. "I appreciate your willingness to cooperate," Carrera said, keeping his voice low as commuters hurried past our corner table. "Your father's case could help us dismantle a criminal network that's been operating in Colorado's construction industry for over 5 years." Carrera explained that Robert's cooperation would involve wearing a concealed recording device during a family meeting where he would confess to stealing client funds and detail his relationship with the underground gambling network. The recorded statements would provide prosecutors with the evidence needed to build cases against the real criminals who had exploited Robert's gambling addiction. What guarantees do we have that our family won't lose everything? I asked, remembering Jake's discovery about my grandfather's will and the potential inheritance issues we still needed to resolve. Carrera smiled, suggesting he understood our concerns about financial survival. "The FBI has no interest in seizing your family's legitimate assets. We want to shut down the criminal organization and help families like yours recover from their exploitation. Your cooperation could actually strengthen your legal position." Elena nodded, adding that federal authorities often viewed cooperation favorably when resolving related civil matters. If I pursued my grandfather's inheritance challenge through probate court, my family's assistance in a major federal investigation would demonstrate exactly the kind of integrity and leadership Eugene Thornfield had valued. Derek asked about timeline and logistics for the recording operation. Carrera explained that the FBI needed the evidence within 48 hours to maintain his undercover identity and prevent the criminal organization from discovering the investigation. The recording would take place at our family home, with federal agents positioned nearby to ensure everyone's safety. One final question. I said, studying Carrera's face for any signs of deception. "Why should we trust you? How do we know this isn't some elaborate scheme to destroy our family?" Carrera produced his federal credentials, and Elena vouched for his authenticity based on her previous cooperation with federal law enforcement. More importantly, our family had no better alternatives for dealing with the criminal threats and legal challenges we faced. Your brother tried to handle this crisis alone and made everything worse," Carrera said, glancing at Derek with understanding rather than condemnation. "Your father created this situation through decisions he made while struggling with addiction. But you have the opportunity to end this cycle and protect your family while helping other families avoid similar exploitation." As we left Union Station, I realized that accepting federal cooperation was both our best legal option and our only chance for moral redemption. Robert's crimes had victimized innocent clients who trusted Thornfield Construction with their savings. Derek's cover-up attempts had only deepened our family's criminal exposure, while allowing the real predators to continue operating. Working with federal law enforcement would force us to confront the truth about our family's failures, but it also offered a path toward justice and healing that individual efforts could never achieve. The FBI's surveillance van was positioned 2 blocks from my family's home, concealed among the construction vehicles and utility trucks that regularly served our affluent Colorado Springs neighborhood. Agent Carrera and Elena monitored my movements through a sophisticated recording device concealed beneath my shirt collar, while a backup team waited at strategic positions around the house. My hands trembled as I approached the front door, knowing that the next hour would determine whether my family faced destruction or redemption. The recording equipment felt heavy against my chest, a constant reminder that every word spoken inside would be preserved as evidence in federal court proceedings. I found Robert exactly where I'd expected, slumped in his leather recliner in the study, surrounded by the financial devastation Derek had created. Empty beer bottles suggested he'd been drinking since morning, and his usually precise appearance had deteriorated into wrinkled clothes and unshaven stubble. Linda sat in her favorite armchair across the room, and I was shocked by her physical condition. She'd lost significant weight since our last family gathering, her cheeks hollow and her skin carrying a yellowish pallor I'd previously attributed to stress. Dark circles under her eyes suggested weeks of sleepless nights, and her hands shook when she reached for her coffee cup. "We need to talk," I announced, settling onto the leather couch where I'd spent countless childhood hours. "I know about the stolen client money, Dad. Derek told me everything." Robert's reaction was immediate and defensive. "Derek's lying to protect himself. He's the one who destroyed our business with his gambling and stupid investments. I've been trying to save this family while he threw away everything we built." I pulled out Derek's evidence files, spreading bank statements and email records across the mahogany coffee table. The documentation painted an undeniable picture of systematic theft spanning 3 years, showing how Robert had gradually diverted larger amounts from client escrow accounts as his gambling addiction intensified. Mrs. Patricia Huang's kitchen renovation payment, I said, reading from Derek's notes. $47,000 transferred from her escrow account to your personal checking account on March 15th. 3 days later, that same amount was withdrawn as cash from the Blackhawk ATM at the Ameristar Casino. Robert stared at the evidence, his face cycling through anger, denial, and finally resignation as he realized the scope of documentation Derek had assembled. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," he said weakly. "Then explain it to me." I pressed conscious of the recording device, capturing every word. "Help me understand how stealing from clients was supposed to solve anything." Linda's soft crying filled the study as Robert began his confession, his voice breaking with shame and exhaustion. "Your mother was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer 18 months ago. Our insurance company denied coverage for the experimental treatments available at University of Colorado Hospital, claiming they were investigational rather than medically necessary." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My mother was dying, and I'd been completely unaware of her condition. The weight loss, the yellow pallor, the exhaustion, suddenly everything made tragic sense. The treatments cost $180,000 out of pocket. Robert continued, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I liquidated our retirement accounts, took every legal loan I could qualify for, even sold my vintage car collection. But it wasn't enough. Robert described the agonizing process of watching insurance companies deny claim after claim while Linda's condition worsened. The experimental therapy offered hope for extending her life, but the medical system demanded payment before treatment could begin. I started with small amounts from client accounts. Robert admitted meeting my eyes for the first time. Just temporary loans that I planned to replace once Linda was healthy, and I could work longer hours to generate extra income. I kept detailed records of every penny, intending to pay everything back with interest. But Linda's cancer had progressed more rapidly than doctors predicted, requiring additional treatments and medications that weren't covered by any insurance plan. Each new medical crisis had demanded more money, pushing Robert to steal larger amounts as his desperation grew. The gambling started as a last resort. Robert continued, his voice filled with self-loathing. I thought if I could multiply the money quickly at the casinos, I could pay for Linda's treatments and return the client funds before anyone discovered what I'd done. It seemed logical at first, just a few big wins to solve all our problems. Linda spoke for the first time since my arrival, her voice weak but determined. I begged him to stop Hoban. I told Robert I'd rather die than have him destroy his integrity and our family's reputation. But he wouldn't listen. The gambling addiction had developed, gradually fueled by the false hope that one successful night at the poker tables could solve all their financial problems. Robert had started with small bets, but the pressure to win larger amounts had driven him to take greater risks with higher stakes. Vincent Carrera approached me at the Ameristar Casino 6 months ago. Robert said, confirming Agent Carrera's undercover operation. He seemed to understand my situation and offered loans that traditional banks wouldn't approve. The interest rates were high, but he promised flexible repayment terms if I helped him connect with other contractors facing similar problems. Robert had gradually become part of Carrera's network, providing information about construction industry colleagues who might be vulnerable to similar manipulation. The organization had systematically identified business owners struggling with cash flow, family medical crises, or personal addictions, then provided them with gambling opportunities and easy credit that created cycles of dependency. I never meant for any of this to hurt you or Derek, Robert said, tears streaming down his face. I knew Derek wasn't ready for the responsibilities I gave him, but I hoped his business education might help him avoid the kind of desperate decisions I'd made. I thought if I kept you away from the leadership role, you'd be protected from the financial pressure that destroyed me. The recording device captured Robert's complete breakdown as he expressed his love for Linda, his shame about betraying client trust, and his desperate regret about damaging his relationship with both sons. He admitted that choosing Derek for the inheritance had been motivated by fear rather than confidence. Fear that I might discover his crimes if I gained access to detailed financial records. Linda struggled to stand, moving slowly across the study to embrace me with trembling arms. We're so sorry, Hoban. We never meant to hurt you or make you feel unworthy. Your father and I have made terrible choices, but we've always been proud of your work and your character. As the recording session continued, I felt the weight of my family's secrets finally lifting. The truth was devastating, but it was also liberating. For the first time in months, we were facing our problems honestly instead of hiding behind pride and favoritism. The federal investigation would proceed, but our family's cooperation had already begun the process of healing and redemption that individual efforts could never have achieved. Agent Carrera and the FBI team moved swiftly once they reviewed the recorded confession. Robert's detailed admissions provided everything federal prosecutors needed to close their investigation while offering him the plea agreement they'd promised. Within 72 hours, Robert was pleading guilty to embezzlement and money laundering charges, receiving 3 years of supervised probation, 800 hours of community service, and full restitution to affected clients instead of the 20-year prison sentence he could have faced. The FBI's broader investigation yielded dramatic results that extended far beyond our family's situation. Robert's cooperation helped them arrest 12 other individuals involved in money laundering schemes targeting desperate construction company owners. The criminal network had been exploiting vulnerable contractors across Colorado for over 5 years, and our case provided the evidence needed to dismantle their entire operation. With Derek's forgery charges dropped and my own liability eliminated, I was free to pursue the inheritance challenge Jake had discovered. The probate court review of my grandfather's will proceeded smoothly, especially after Robert formally acknowledged that the proper inheritance evaluation had never occurred. Eugene Thornfield's requirement that the business and property pass to the grandson, demonstrating greatest dedication to the family trade and values of honest work, clearly favored me over Derek. Judge Patricia Williams, who oversaw the probate proceedings, noted that my 5 years of dedicated service to Thornfield Construction, combined with my family's cooperation in a major federal investigation, exemplified exactly the kind of integrity and leadership my grandfather had valued. The court awarded me full ownership of both the business and the family property, recognizing my commitment to honest work and ethical business practices. But rather than leaving my family homeless and powerless, I chose to structure the inheritance in ways that reflected the man this crisis had helped me become. Thornfield Construction was reorganized as a family business with me as majority owner and chief executive officer, but I created meaningful roles for everyone who'd wronged me. Derek became director of business development, a position requiring him to complete addiction counseling and financial management courses before assuming full responsibilities. His business education, when properly channeled, could provide value to the company's growth strategies. Derek accepted this arrangement gratefully, finally understanding that leadership required earning trust rather than demanding respect. For my parents, I established a life estate arrangement, allowing them to remain in the family home while I held the legal title. This protected them from future financial crises while ensuring the property stayed within Thornfield family control. Robert and Linda would have security and dignity during their remaining years, but they could never again jeopardize the family's assets through poor decisions. Most importantly, I used the company's group health insurance plan to cover Linda's ongoing cancer treatments. I researched the best oncologists in Colorado and arranged for her to receive care at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, where her prognosis improved significantly with proper medical attention. The experimental treatments that had triggered Robert's desperate choices were now covered through legitimate insurance channels I'd secured. My relationship with Sarah deepened throughout this crisis in ways I hadn't expected. She'd supported me during the darkest moments, and her initial warnings about family dynamics had proved prophetic. 6 months after resolving the federal case, I proposed to her during a sunset dinner overlooking the Front Range, and we began planning to build our own home on a section of the family property where we could start fresh while remaining connected to my roots. Thornfield Construction thrived under my leadership in ways that validated my grandfather's faith in merit-based inheritance. Annual revenue grew from $2.1 million to $3.2 million as my reputation for integrity attracted new clients throughout Colorado's Front Range. Several customers who'd been defrauded by Robert's theft chose to continue working with the company after learning about my efforts to make complete restitution. The business expansion allowed me to hire additional skilled workers and invest in modern equipment that improved both safety and efficiency. I implemented profit-sharing programs that gave employees meaningful stakes in the company's success, creating the kind of workplace culture my grandfather had envisioned when he'd started Thornfield Construction 35 years earlier. Robert's community service involved teaching construction skills to at-risk youth through a program operated by the Colorado Department of Corrections. His expertise remained valuable even after his crimes, in helping young people learn legitimate trades provided him with purpose and redemption. He also attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings, religiously finally confronting the addiction that had nearly destroyed our family. Derek proved himself worthy of the second chance I'd given him, bringing in several major contracts through networking skills and business education. His MBA knowledge, when applied ethically, helped Thornfield Construction bid more competitively on complex projects and manage financial planning more effectively. He also established a scholarship fund for students from families affected by gambling addiction, transforming his painful experience into assistance for others facing similar challenges. 1 year later, I stood in the completed addition to our family home, a beautiful sunroom where Linda could rest comfortably during her treatments while enjoying views of the Rocky Mountains. The space was filled with natural light and furnished with comfortable chairs where she could read, visit with grandchildren, and watch the sunrise over the foothills. Linda's health had stabilized remarkably with proper medical care. The experimental treatments combined with conventional therapies covered by our improved insurance plan had slowed her cancer's progression and improved her quality of life significantly. While her prognosis remained uncertain, she was able to enjoy time with family and participate in activities that brought her joy. As I reflected on the profound changes in our family circumstances, I realized that Derek's catastrophic mistakes had ultimately led us to discoveries and solutions we never could have achieved otherwise. His gambling crisis had exposed Robert's theft, which connected us to federal law enforcement, which revealed my grandfather's true inheritance intentions, which gave me the legal standing to restructure our entire family dynamic. The experience taught me that real leadership isn't about being chosen or favored by others. It's about making difficult decisions with integrity when everything falls apart around you. My parents had selected Derek based on superficial credentials and charm, but leadership requires the courage to confront uncomfortable truths and the wisdom to build solutions that serve everyone's legitimate interests. Eugene Thornfield's vision of merit-based inheritance had been vindicated in ways he never could have anticipated. The grandson, who demonstrated the greatest dedication to family trade and honest work values, wasn't the one with the MBA degree, but the one willing to risk everything to protect family while ensuring justice for those we'd wronged. Thornfield Construction now represents something more valuable than a successful business. It embodies the principles of integrity, redemption, and second chances that define the best aspects of American family enterprise. The company logo features my grandfather's motto, "Built on solid foundations." Words that now carry deeper meaning about character, honesty, and the enduring strength of families who face their failures with courage and truth. What challenges has your family faced that required you to step up and lead when others couldn't? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and doing what was legally or morally right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about times when you discovered strength you didn't know you had. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding redemption, and share this with anyone who's dealing with difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most painful experiences lead us to discover who we really are and what we're truly capable of achieving. I hope your own family finds the kind of healing and happiness that comes from facing the truth together.